The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Hello there, Bitcoiners.
Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page.
Hey there.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1. Blackrock files for spot Bitcoin ETF with Coinbase as a crypto custodian. Yes, that's right. Bitcoin ETFs are back again. For those of you who haven't been here the dozen other times that we covered ETF, an ETF, or exchange traded fund, is a way for people to own Bitcoin using their stock market or retirement account. A lot of people, I know, not you Bitcoiners who put all your money into Bitcoin, but a lot of people who haven't put all their money into Bitcoin hold their money in retirement accounts, which in the US are pre-tax. So you can gamble with the money, and then if you win more money, pay taxes only on the winnings, not pay taxes before you get to gamble. Anyway, they want to own Bitcoin without hardware wallets, sending, receiving, public and private addresses, and all that nonsense. And they want a spot ETF. BlackRock, one of the largest asset management firms in the world, has now filed for one. Dan Eve, do they get it? Does the United States get its crypto Bitcoin spot ETF at last?
Well, I think it's definitely a step up from all the other SEC applications in terms of in terms of the size of this company and the amount that the amount of funds that is it 10 trillion or something they've got funds under management. And obviously they're a very well-respected sort of name in traditional finance, right? So from one hand, there's a lot of people think spot ETFs are bad, but kind of at the same time, it's that same situation where it does lend credence to the idea of owning Bitcoin, obviously via a third party, or at least owning a part of that pie via a trust. So I think some Bitcoiners might see that as a good thing, because if Coinbase lose their keys, it could mean that Bitcoin's gone forever, and therefore, and they're going to probably have a lot of Bitcoin in that trust, right? Is it going to be it's going to be bought and settled in Bitcoin as well, right? It's not just going to be futures. Well, we don't know. Well, it said that Coinbase are custodian, so I'd imagine so. As James Locke said,
it is a spot ETF, so it will be the actual price of Bitcoin, not the future price of Bitcoin. Previously, for whatever reason, they've let us had future prices, things which seem to wreck the market, whereas a spot ETF might actually support the market.
Yeah. And as James Locke pointed out, that BlackRock has a 99.8% success rate in terms of track record of 600 ETFs launched. So that's like a huge, huge success rate. And if anyone's going to do it, right, it's not going to be a small or at least small in the general world, a small known, a lesser known company like Grayscale. It will be someone like BlackRock swinging in and just dinging around the place and getting their ETF. And they've got a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. They can twist a lot of arms. So maybe they're going to beat a traditional cryptocurrency company to actually getting a spot traded ETF. The other thing is that with all the rejections in the past, right, it hasn't been the rejections of the Grayscale one and all the other previous spot ETFs. It hasn't been a rejection based on the company that wants to launch the ETF. It's always been a critique of the asset itself. People saying that Bitcoin price can be manipulated and blah blah blah. So I think that where that criticism before has been on Bitcoin itself and not the company. Now that a company like BlackRock, which is well respected in the finance world, at least at least they have such a big swing in the finance world, then that lends a lot more credence, right? Because they're actually they're buying into something that they think isn't market manipulated as much as say all the newspapers say and all the traditional media say. So yeah, there's obviously a lot of people for it and against it. The other ones that have been rejected have been like ARK, Vanek, Grayscale, some others, Bitwise. My favorite ETF rejection was the one in 2017. That was just, I can't remember who it was in 2017, but it was amazing. There was just such a hype around it. And it was like literally being on this, whoa, when a goal's about to be scored at a football match or something like that, and obviously it was rejected. So it was quite, but it was the hype around that was insane in sort of early 2017. Will it get approved? Well, with such a huge success rate from BlackRock, it kind of seems so. The fact that they are using Coinbase as a custodian, though, Coinbase have obviously taken a lot of flack recently. And another thing is that BlackRock obviously trust them as a company with all the other lawsuits that are hanging about, so that they believe in the longevity of Coinbase as a company. So maybe that's going to work in Coinbase's favor with the rest of the lawsuits that are hanging around with the SEC. Because BlackRock would have obviously done their due diligence, and maybe there will even be some assistance, from BlackRock for Coinbase in fighting back the SEC in their general lawsuits. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how this one swings.
I do love that we've been at this long enough where Dan has his favorite ETF rejection. Oh, that was the best one. That one. Those other one's not as good. Now, I do wish people would stop hanging out in Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones chat rooms, wherever they're naming these companies. Grayscale, Blackrock, Grayskull, He-Man. But Victoria Jones, are you ready for loads of Wall Street money, all the investors going in and out of Bitcoin without having to get a hardware wallet or any of this other nonsense?
Well, what I find intriguing about every time there's an ETF hype, it normally indicates the top of a market. That's been my observation. And of course, exchange traded funds were originally introduced into the stock market, for example, in order to trade things that you had to make predictions on because they were seasonal. So, for example, if you wanted to trade wheat when wheat was out of season, for example, and of course with gold, because gold's heavy and is hard to transport, ETFs were a way of trading gold. And there are some who argue that once we had an ETF, it was very difficult for there to be an organic price for gold, because things like the ETF market, could influence the price. Now, I'm not a market investment expert, so I can't really comment on that, but I have heard that used as an argument. And so, of course, one of the dangers, if that is true, is that, once you've kind of got all of these ETFs, is there a possibility that could be used as a way of manipulating the price of Bitcoin? But of course, the difference with Bitcoin compared to some of these other commodities, if you're trading wheat, it's difficult to take possession of, shuffles of wheat or barrels of oil or bars of gold. Whereas what you can do with Bitcoin is you can store it in your own hardware wallet. And I think this is actually the reason why it's been really hard to get one of these ETFs approved, because I think those who are actually navigating the rules of this know exactly what those dangers are. Because the thing is, if you've got a fund that is supposedly trading against the price of Bitcoin, but then most of the Bitcoins in circulation go into people's private possession, it means there's less that's available on the market. But of course, same with fractional reserve banking, you could start to have situations where they're setting up ETFs with only fractions of a Bitcoin. So I don't know. My spidey senses say it's a recipe for manipulation. I don't trust it whatsoever. But interesting to discuss all the points with you guys.
Oh, come on, Victoria. On behalf of IT guys everywhere, we should let large companies hold large amounts of Bitcoin. We won't screw it up. No boat rides. Promise.
They can hold as much as they like, as long as they don't do any shenanigans, but we all know they will.
Well, that's right. And I was just saying again how Once again, businesses come along, they attach themselves to Bitcoin. Then there's all this risk of bad custody, fractional reserve, boating accidents, and this is Bitcoin's fault. Joshua Shigala, what do you think about the chances once again of a Bitcoin spot ETF?
Oh, the thing is, the other panelists are correct, Victoria and Dan. It is that when you incorporate these large players, it starts to have the dog, the tail wagging the dog rather than the other way around. And this is what's horrible is that we're like, yeah, we're building this thing to be the alternative to the mainstream system. And the thing is that the mainstream system is so mammoth that if you attach yourself too much to it, the mainstream thing will move and you'll move with it. The crocodile will just grab you and roll you and drown you. And so, yeah, it's tricky. Like, there's so many things about the stock market in general that have been a little bit manipulated, not manipulated, but has evolved kind of shittily, to say the least. So, for instance, the stock market was never designed to have 401k or these superannuation funds, these massive funds to pouring into it, sloshing all this money around. It was designed for people to buy some stock of a company. But now we've got like the governments of the world forcing every one of their people to put in vast amounts of money, like their life savings pretty much, into the stock market, slushes about, and that has knock-on effects, because then speculators come in and they take advantage of certain things, and as a CEO who's maybe studied a long time to become a CEO, has to make pretty much short-term decisions rather than good long-term ones. Like, maybe a good long-term one would be to invest in your company. Yeah, you make a little bit of a loss at first, but it's a long-term thing, and then you have bigger growth. The problem is, with all this money that's slushing around, suddenly these speculators are like, yeah, put everything there. What? He's done what? Long-term thinking, pulls it out, destroys the company valuation because maybe he's thinking long-term, and then they get fired. So they don't want to get fired, so they don't ever do long-term thinking. So they're always doing quick, let's pump the stock sort of thinking. And when you sort of, I'm just saying, I'm going on this path because what happens when you have a Bitcoin ETF, maybe these sort of unforeseen consequences start to happen to the Bitcoin price as well. And we've seen when there's a large economic collapse, Bitcoin was designed to sort of skirt around that or be the hedge. Instead, it'll be too much attached to the mainstream that it'll get dragged down with it. Of course, at the end of the day, there's only 21 million of these things. But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the ETFs. Yes, it's a nice pump for the price, I'm sure. But I would just rather just leave it be. But it's a free market. If they want to make an ETF with it, they make an ETF with it.
It's amazing what you can do with financial technologies these days. In the US, there's this giant company called Instant Pot, and they make like a pressure cooker with a crock pot inside. And so what they did with that is they, as you're saying, formed a giant financial company and a hedge firm, and they traded the futures of how many of these pots they're going to need. They even merged with another giant company called Pyrex that makes like glass bowls, just a traditional glass bowl manufacturer. Both companies are going out of business thanks to the fantastic financial shenanigans and the futures and the borrowing and the whatever else they did to this otherwise straightforward idea of make a useful kitchen appliance, sell a whole bunch of them, profit off of each one. So yes, it's exciting to bring those new technologies to Bitcoin. The question is on everyone's mouth. Dan looks distracted, but we'll ask him anyway. Force prediction. Is BlackRock successful? Do they get their Bitcoin spot ETF?
I think so. I think they're I was gonna use that awful term, too big to fail. But I think they're too big to be rejected. They're been around for a long time. They're so ingrained in every company almost on earth, and every financial institution they have probably a lot of influence in. And this isn't just a straightforward random crypto company coming out of the blue and asking for an ETF. This is a huge existing company, like the biggest, right? Are they the biggest, or they're one of the biggest at least? And so I think that's got a lot more sway than just from the regulator's perspective, than just a company that kind of is a through and through crypto company.
Don't worry, the SEC will allow it, and then they'll fine them. That's how they work.
They did do that recently, and the Blackrock is kind of a big deal around here. They have fine mahogany shelves and furniture, and people should look out for them. Victoria, what do you think? Are they too big? Do they get their way?
I think a lot depends on how long it takes and whether or not the rest of the financial system implodes before they get there. I think really that's what it will depend on. I think it's a race against time. So yeah.
That's not a yes or a no. Josh Segala, yes.
But.
Yes, but. Oh, Josh Segala, do we get a yes, a no, or a yes, but?
I get a yes, but.
All right, yes, but. I think, I don't know, I thought it would happen all the other times. I thought it was a total no-brainer of an idea, like these people that don't want to risk it with the hardware wallets and learning about crypto and all that stuff, get this ETF thing. But for some reason, they only allow futures, not spot. Dan, did you have more on this issue?
Yeah, I was going to say that there's I think Victoria really pointed out something that I hadn't thought of, which is that this time it's different. That before it was at the peak, it was at the right peak. We're near all-time highs every other rejection, or at least in when the rejection was in 2017, it was a local peak where it went from $600 to $3,500, I think, at the time it was rejected. Obviously, it went on to go to nearly 20. But there's not the kind of hype around the price that may scare off that may help the rejection, because it's on fire sale right now, right? It's not like a scary price where they could agree it and it could they could start the ETF and then people will almost immediately lose a bunch of money. So I think the timing is a lot better this time.
This time, for real, it's happening. Moving on to issue 2. Issue 2, Musk and Dorsey criticize Apple over its treatment of a social media app that allows Bitcoin tips. Yes, they're saying that the social media app Domus that runs on the Nostr network may be removed from the Apple App Store for allowing people to zap Lightning donations to each other. Apple is afraid that it'll also allow people to buy and sell digital items such as software, NFTs, anything else, which through the App Store, they'll only allow you to do if they get their 30% cut. We do have a message from Ben Ark, one of the co-founders and early developers of the Nostr network. He says that zaps are shit. That's the problem. It's a shitty hack which was easy to censor. It's well documented in the NIP that it was rushed out. As one of its biggest critics, I've got to say a big fat I told you so over the last few days. Ben is on his way to the Oslo Freedom Forum Festival, and he hopes that they will install zaps in a better way with a better technological solution than the one that was previously used, obviously. Victoria Jones, what do you think about Apple and the App Store threatening to remove Domus over zaps?
Well, to be fair, I don't think Apple probably were rejecting it just based on the fact that it technically wasn't very good, as Ben says. I think they're definitely rejecting it because it's a direct threat to their business model. And if I were Apple, I'd be equally concerned. But at the same time, it's like King Canute sitting in the water thinking that it can hold the tide back. I mean, it's just like, dude, it's over. You either figure out how to cope with this or, it's dead. And so I think Apple is fighting a losing battle. I mean, fair play. I think in their situation, I'm not sure what else they could really do. You know, at the moment, they've got the dominance in the software industry to refuse all of these requests and to try and, you know, block anyone who's trying to undermine, you know, their revenue streams. But, you know, ultimately, Bitcoin allows that, even if it's not Nostra, even if it's not Zaps. I mean, I've now got, you know, a lightning paywall on the newsletters on my website, you know, and the reason I did that was to show people that it's possible. You know, you don't actually even need Apple anymore. If you can set up your own website, you know, you can have, so, you know, and that's just one way. That's the beauty of the technology. There are so many different ways you could apply this. So of course, you know, people were trying to have something on the App Store, and I understand why people want it on the App Store, because everyone's got phones, and so it makes it easily accessible. But the thing is, eventually someone's going to come up with something that's just so amazing, and because Apple won't allow it on their App Store, people will find other ways to access it, and we've still got access to the internet. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it, but yeah, like I say, King Canute sitting in the tide, trying to hold it back. It's not going to work.
Well, I do think one of the simplest ways to work around it is just to have a web app and then to have people bookmark it to their homepage. If you use the Safari browser, you can create a bookmark on your homepage that'll launch the web app, and it looks just like you're in Twitter or Damus or Snort or whatever you're using. So I don't think it's all that dire for Apple users, like they wouldn't be able to use this software. But I do think, according to Peter Thiel in the book 0 to 1, the goal of startups is to acquire and establish a monopoly. And that's what Apple is doing here. Apple built the phone, the operating system, the app store. Now, naturally, they're gatekeeping on those things and trying to make as much money as they can for as long as they can. And again, they built the whole system. So if you want your own system, or if you want a free open system, use Android or open source software. If you want to use a closed system that sometimes functions better because it's written by more coders faster, use the Apple system. Josh Shigala, what do you think about Apple versus Damus in the App Store?
Yeah, the thing is, I tweeted about this the other day. You know, apps or applications, as they used to be called, were things that you downloaded from someone's website. They coded something and you downloaded it. Yeah, half the time it had a virus, and it sucked like that. But it was open and free to do what you want. Now, Apple created this beautiful little siloed city where you could go there, and you know, I think it was the same reason why a lot of people went away from like torrenting music to Spotify. Yeah, the torrenting music was free, but Spotify was really nicely organized. So you could look up, see an album, see the art, everything else is there. It's really nice. And they'd pay for that. It's the same with app stores. It's like, wow, this is really nice. I'll pay for that. The problem is that Apple doesn't give you that choice to say, wow, you guys organize and make a really nice app store. I'm gonna use you guys rather than downloading from this sketchy site, because you guys also offer the thing of checking first and maybe looking through the code, looking for things that can have security vulnerabilities. So I think it is time to jailbreak the iPhone again. I remember jailbreaking my iPhone like version 1, because it had this nice fat hard drive in it, and I couldn't plug it into my computer and use it as a hard drive. Like, it was while flash drives were still kind of expensive, and I was like, I'm carrying this thing around. I'd like to like download some files and bring it to my computer at home or whatever. And so I jailbroke it. And the other thing it couldn't do was it couldn't do a hotspot in the early days. Of course, all of this stuff now is there and you can do everything with it. But yeah, this whole siloing that's happened is really unfortunate. And you see the tyranny happen. And most people don't act on the warning signs. And this is what Bitcoiners, libertarians are all about, right? They're like, yeah, you've got the freedom now. You might not see it, but we warn you of the time when if a government has too much power, you might like the government that you voted in. And you might like the fact that they passed some law that's fantastic right now because you think that they're good. But as soon as someone else gets voted in, it's bad. So with Apple, I think it's really unfortunate that they have this this thing, and it's just time right now to basically. I've got an iPhone, and I'm not going to drop it because I really like it. They make beautiful hardware and really functional stuff, but I think I might have to jailbreak it if they're going to stop people from actually, being able to sell applications. And I'd like to have the choice to download an application myself and risk the security vulnerabilities that it might bring. I think it's an important part of computing in general.
Yeah, I think, Josh, it's just all about your last point with the security vulnerabilities. They're just too afraid that people will hack the phone through these loose apps. And you've seen that even with a tightly controlled iOS app structure, they've already had incredible leaks like the fappening that were a disaster to their company and their reputation. Imagine if all the normal people's photos were stolen, or all the normal Netflix account passwords were stolen, things like this. I think there's too much good stuff. Blackmail information about the apps you use, the photos, the messages you send inside the phone. So they've taken that security first perspective. And again, obviously there are alternatives and other phone companies that you can use. And I remember I had to jailbreak my phone just to get folders. So it is also an option. If you're an advanced user, you can jailbreak, you can install all kinds of crazy apps. I think I had a YouTube app that would download it to my phone before that feature was offered. And, that is a pay feature for YouTube, but still, these early apps sometimes provide you features the companies aren't ready to offer. And if you want that bleeding edge software, you do take a risk. And I think the consumers might not realize how much information they put on their phone and how valuable it might be to a
But it's crazy, to ask for 30% of everything that comes is pretty intense. But the free market, you mentioned monopolies that every startup is to head towards. Actually, natural monopolies are very, very hard to find in normal in totally free markets. They're very, very difficult because consumers just don't like to be ripped off or badly treated, so they will move. The thing is, with these hardcore network effects of a phone, when you start to have a phone which is your communications tool, your everything, like your everything, your work, everything. And the switching cost is hard. The switching cost is very difficult. So, yeah.
Well, I think we all know where I'm going with this. Frank Norris and the octopus and the railroad man. Whatever the market will bear. That's what they're charging. That's what they're going to keep charging. And I agree with you, Josh. The network effect is hard to get out of. Like, nobody likes Zuckerberg, right? He's running Facebook terribly. The metaverse thing's a disaster. The politics thing has been a disaster, and so forth. Yet no one can really quit Facebook because they have your friend and they have your neighbor and they have your cousin, and you're going to meet this person and they want to talk on Messenger. Or even worse now, they own WhatsApp, they own Instagram, they've expanded they bought Oculus, they've really expanded. So it's hard to get away.
Yeah.
Let's go to Dan Eve. More on this. Dan Eve, are you going to jailbreak your phone? What do you think? They're taking away the tips.
Oh, I do miss those days of the tinkering days. But I think the point about the viruses, that actually was one of the reasons why I stopped kind of jailbreaking, and because I especially when you've got, even if it's just small amounts of like crypto and stuff, but the more you use your phone to have banking and things like that on, the more more of a disastrous effect a virus can actually have on you. So that's kind of one of the reasons. But they're definitely making a case for people to swing that way if they're going to be completely tightening down everything like to this extent. And it's interesting that finally, like Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk actually kind of agree on something about the way Apple's actually approached it. But it's such a sledgehammer approach because these are micro payments as well. It's not even like it's a game like, I don't know, Candy Crush or whatever, where they can make loads from people buying £10 packets of sweets to get through levels, or however that works, right? This is like people sending like sats, literally 21 sats, as I think it was BTT Moonguy says it, 21 sats, their favorite amount, which is $0.006. So these are micro amounts. That's the whole point of it. So you're locking down a system with literally micro payments that are worth way less than the average app that you'd actually like pay for. So it just seems like a really silly thing to lock down so heavily. And I like the analogy to Napster and other sort of old school apps like that, and actually the transition right into going from I'm doing something that's kind of slightly risky because I'm downloading songs, and and sometimes it doesn't have the right artwork with it and that sort of stuff, to just biting the bullet and paying the money and just getting all the songs in a nice order so that you don't have to like relabel all of the MP3s that you've downloaded because they're all like different format or whatever, and it's hard to navigate them around your system. So it's a shame that Apple are actually are doing this, and that I think it said that was it either Jack or Elon Musk tagged Tim Cook, and he still hasn't kind of responded or mentioned anything about it. But they're what they're doing as well is they're not taking money from the creator of an app. They're taking, or the company that owns an app, they're taking money from like people that tweet, people that write a Nosted, message. There's a huge difference, right, between them being able to rake money off a company that's going to earn them loads and just someone sending a nice little tip to someone who's written some nice content. It just seems really heavy-handed, and I'd be surprised if they don't kind of walk it back, because it is going to potentially swing people the other way, especially the people that like a bit of freedom, right? People thinking either about jailbreaking, which is bad for the iOS ecosystem, because then it's a slippery slope from just jailbreaking your phone to then like getting apps for free. So they could be losing revenue there. It could have a negative effect. The iron hammer slapping down so hard. I don't think there's been any mention of Google kind of doing the same, but obviously they have a different mechanism for actually adding apps. Obviously the Apple one's a lot more secure. We've said about the security that comes with it, the extra kind of peace of mind you have, that Apple have kind of tested it as well, and it's run through their own testing process. But we've seen this with other companies that don't allow you to actually buy your subscription, because it's kind of like medicine, isn't it? For some people, they need their apps. It's an addiction. But the companies won't let you subscribe to the service via the App Store. They'd rather that you do it, or they would prefer that you do it online, because then they don't have to pay the 30% to Apple. So maybe this is one of those events that could lead to a bit of an exodus of companies, or them completely rethinking about how they do business with iOS and finding ways around it.
Fortnite went through this brawl as well with Apple and ended up pulling everything out a long time ago. But the actual funny part about all of this is if Apple took Lightning payments, then they could tell the developer to fork a little bit, that 30% off automatically, and it would happen. So
yeah, that's also they could actually be clever and make commission off it.
Long term, that's a positive outcome here. If Apple did take Lightning payments, they could snitch off cut off the 30% there. I think the real battle of this is if you look at Amazon and the Kindle. For the longest time, if you go to the Amazon store in the Amazon app, it will say things like, you cannot purchase Kindle books on this program or this device. But if you go through the web browser on your phone, you can purchase Kindle books. So Amazon obviously unwilling to pay the 30%. It's not the best thing for customers. It's not the easiest to use, but it's a workaround they're willing to use. And Dan, I remember when Steve Jobs introduced the phone and he held it up, he believed he was going to get a patent on the touch screen, on the way the finger worked with the touch screen. He was going to get a patent on the two fingers zooming. He was going to get a patent on double clicking on a touch screen. He was going to patent, and he lost to Samsung, and it's a long, complicated story, but they were going to lock down every kind of new innovation on this phone because it was so innovative, because everyone did copy it. And if they're just now, backing down where they only get money for the software, again, they had to build the hardware. No one else was building a phone that looked like this. They had to build the operating system. They had to imagine it. They couldn't just steal it from Xerox this time. So quite a lot happened that people like just jump right over, and they're like, Android has this, blah, blah, blah. Android's a copy of the iPhone. I mean, not that it matters, but it is a copy in the same way Apple and Windows are copies of Xerox. So,
but it wasn't at the iPhone. That wasn't the first touchscreen phone. I remember I'm sure there was phones before that. I mean, they came with a stylus, but they had a similar.
They pretty much all had half keyboards.
Yeah.
If you look at the
box. Yeah, that's the difference.
The iPad. I had an iPad, and
yeah.
but it was stylus. I couldn't use my finger.
I like that when that law set.
Palm Pilots were similar form factor devices. Yeah.
I like when that Apple lawsuit with Samsung was kicking off, and there was all those memes about slide to unlock, and they're like comparing it to like a transit van, like slide to unlock or a normal door lock. Like, yeah, you can't really patent that, because when you think about it as well, if you have a screen, right? There's sliding your fingers like one of the things you do. How can you like, what else do you? Yeah, crazy.
But tying it to unlock was genius. Remember, Amazon got a patent for one-click purchases. If you want to buy something with one click, which seems like a very novel or not novel idea, it seems like, I want this, like, give to me. No, they have a patent on that, and they charge people, and I think they pay. I think people pay like pennies or micro pennies for a transaction. Crazy. So, and they just got there first, buy it now. I think eBay might pay Amazon for a cut of that. For the exit question, we've talked a lot about tips on this show. We used to talk about Change Tip. We used to talk about the Reddit tip bot that was run by Change Tip for a while. And I don't know, it's been my opinion for a while that chips kind of cheapen communication. If you write a good post and it goes viral, you just feel good about it. But if you get $200, maybe you're thinking, I should write another similar good post so I can get more $200. Micropayments are nice, but they don't add up yet. The technology is good. It's a good test of things, but it's not really real. Just like Steemit pays for blog entries, they get this kind of artificial communication. And additionally, we've seen in the US this huge explosion of just tipping for everything. Every single one of these little counter machines now, when you scan your food and they give you the food directly, now they want a tip for the effort of handing it across the counter, or a tip for putting the things in the bag. Victoria, what do you think about tips? Are they good for communication? Are they the greatest thing since sliced bread, as many people have said about Zaps?
I think a lot depends on how easy they are to implement. And I think once you get used to the technology, then maybe people might enjoy using them for a while because they're novel. But after a while, if it's this much here and that much, it's difficult, And the other problem with tipping is it's always an unknown quantity. For most people who are trying to manage their budgets, all those little payments, they add up to the person who's receiving them, but they add up to the person who's giving them out as well. And I suppose some people are more conscious about these things than others, and after a while it gets a little bit annoying. It's just like, can I just move around the world without having to give someone a payment for something? So at the moment, I think we're kind of going through this Goldilocks phase where all the technology is exploding. We're experimenting with lots of different ways of doing things, and so for a while, it might be quite fun, but after a while it'll get a bit annoying, and I think it will settle down and it will go back to there'll be other ways in which you can kind of manage it. But the thing about posts, though, I think Elon Musk recently tweeted that he was going to set up a payment for individual posts rather than subscriptions. And I have to say, if someone passes me an article, and in order to read the article, I've got to do a monthly subscription, even if it's like a month free, it means I've got to stop and put in all my details and everything like that. And it's just so annoying. If it was just a case of, actually, in this particular occasion, I'd really like to read this article, and if it costs me 10 quid, 10p, then I'll scan it and you can have a lightning payment. No problem. I don't have a problem with that. So I think in terms of comparing it to a monthly subscription, I think there's an advantage for that. And I love it. And that's why that's one of the things I've implemented myself in my own business. So I think, there's clearly an evolution there. Exactly how it will play out, I think we have yet to determine. But yeah.
Well, one of the things we used to have on Pro Tip, which is open source software that anyone could take and improve, is automatic tipping. So if you would set a budget of like $10 a month to tip, and then you just go about your business, you go to all the websites, read all the articles you want. And if the article put a Bitcoin address at the bottom of their page or in the header with a special tag, they would be added to the list. And at the end of the month, it just tipped out, say, $1 to each one of the top 10 people. Everyone gets a donation. You don't have to do anything. It's like Victoria's saying here, as a computer person, many times I count how many clicks it is to do things. And then I say, well, if I did this 100 times, that would be this many clicks. And if it comes down to this tipping thing, if I'm reading your post and I like it, that's great. It should just send you a micro penny. If I have to then like it, then push the zap button, then set how much money I want to zap, then not screw it up, double check it, because what if I zap too much, and then push the button? Like, we're talking 4 or 5 clicks for every post here. Like, I could be reading other posts in that time. And yes, we're early and all that, but like, these ideas have been out there. This tip debate has happened before. Like, I hope we don't forget it. Pro Tip is open source. Anyone can use the software to improve it, or even take the ideas and add them to other versions of Damus or other things.
So,
Dan, Eve, what do you think about tipping?
Yeah, wasn't that what Brave did, right? They did that. Isn't that how Brave works? You kind of give automatic tips or something.
Brave did come out after Pro Tip.
Yeah, of course.
Creators of Brave were interested in the Pro Tip idea and so forth. But again, it's just the idea. What we really want is a working version of this idea that's easy to use, that I can set up, I can put my $10 in, that I don't have to look at. Because all of this, like, I just go around zapping people, like Victoria's saying, that's fun for a few weeks. You're going to get tired of that. And if you're making a create, like you're making mad Bitcoins, you're like, I depend on these people spending 2 weeks zapping everything. That business is going to fail, right? You're going to have 2 weeks of revenue. It's going to be really good. And then you're going to completely disappear.
Yeah, but can you flex? Like, I used to tip people half a Bitcoin.
You could definitely flex that, and that's still a thing. But that's also, in another horrible way, it's kind of horrible for Bitcoin content creators. They're like, you got so many Bitcoin for this. And you're like, yeah, and I spent $100 on the phone bill and $100 on the power bill and $500 on a camera, and it's all gone now. And, no one believes you, and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, no, tipping, the thing is, tipping used to be seen as very un-American before the war, before the collapse of the economy, because it was seen as a bribe. And what, you want a better table? Than no, everybody has a good table. So it became a thing after the Great Depression, because the Great Depression came along, and you basically, if you had a restaurant, you would either say, look, you're all fired, or I pay you sweet F all and you guys live on tips. and so they did that. They said, okay, instead of closing down, at least I'll take minimum wage, like really minimum, and I'll try to get more tips. And that just never went away. And when everything around you is based on tips, it's, like Victoria's spot on. You cannot budget. You can't run your life like that. You can't run your life on, oh, well, I'm going to decide whether this person eats today. I'd much rather just, how much is the price of that? Okay, cool. And pay it. I don't particularly like tips, but it is a normal thing also when you really love someone's service and you're like, here, you round it up or something like that. But when it becomes so crazy, like last time I went to the States, I just couldn't believe that the tips are like included on the bill and you have to pay it. It's not a tip anymore, But it's an interesting thing, the tip thing. It sort of always comes and goes. It has sort of these waves of interaction, and then it disappears because it doesn't really work for long. But Yeah, it's for instance, this show, someone said, why don't you have a QR code? But we've tried it all before. You know, people just don't really use it. They did use it when it was slapping Ben.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
That was cool, right?
And blowing
Yeah.
the smoke in his face.
Yeah, we had the Ben set up a robot
Oh,
hand that would slap him every time you sent some money, so it was quite interactive and wonderful.
Cool.
So that's always good. But yeah, tips are a tough game, and I think, I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan. Also, Victoria had a spot on. I think it's very different to micro payments or nano payments. If I want to read an article, that's not the same as a tip. A tip is a very sort of emotionally charged, sort of a manipulative way of, you know, and you see it in the States. Everyone's so super uber friendly. And you think, are you really friendly, or are you just being manipulative to try and get a good tip at the end?
I went to Cuba once, like, and it was obviously there was more Canadians than Americans there, but like you had a different color band, right? So the from wherever you kind of not came from, not because of they knew you were from, you know, England versus Canada, but the like the aeroplane or whatever it was, or the what's it called, the travel company. And like we never got served, and we realized it was because the English tip after service, whereas Americans and the Canadians tip up front. So like it would sound like there was a recursive circle where the English would never get served because they didn't tip up front, and the Canadians and co would, and so we wouldn't tip at the end because we'd be like, fuck, you know, screw this, we got a terrible service, because they literally ignore you. But maybe, you know. Well, I learned after that to tip up front, but yeah, it is an emotionally manipulative thing. I know what you mean. It's like you know, you just feel really bad, like, because
yeah, and
you know, if you don't.
The very last thing I'd like to say about micro tipping or the whole Bitcoin tipping thing, I used to hate it when you know, these phases of tipping would come through and people would tip like literally 1/100th of a cent, and to me it was like, imagine there's a busker there playing along. It's like throwing 1 cent not into his bucket, but in the bushes next to him. It sort of becomes offensive rather than like, oh, that's a great song, here you go. It's sort of like, yeah, have this cent and throw it like in the bush next to him, like a pure. And so I don't know, like it's a sort of.
Well, and then you have Bitcoin tips where your tip comes with an instruction manual. You know, the
Yeah.
normal guy is just going to hand you $5, but a Bitcoiner, he'll give you a piece of paper and a little card and a piece of words not to remember. And you have to write this down and this website, and don't forget that. And at the end of the day, you're like, wow, this is a really great $5 that you gave me. Even if it becomes $50, it's just so much work to get it. But Josh is right. I don't think that the salary of a waitress should depend upon my mood. That shouldn't be a part of any system. And I also hate the idea of tipping before you get your food. Like Josh said, I read an article recently said that's basically a bribe. That's like you should do things a normal restaurant does, like have cleanliness and wash your hands and cook the food completely. Here's an extra $5 to make sure that happens. You know, like I hope we don't get to that level, but we are very close to it. In America, they've added this tipping box to the end of every transaction. So you go to the hardware store, the person like picks up your stuff and scans it on the scanner. Would you like to pay an extra $5? You go to this same thing. People at work, just normal counters, want tips, and a lot of people feel bad and are tipping. That's the horrible part. These software have been incredibly successful. They are increasing the amount of tips. Victoria,
all symptomatic of hyperinflation, of course, as well.
Yes.
Well, that should, yeah, the money and the tips you have to give are more. The amount you have to pay for food is more. It's a disaster everywhere. Any more on this tipping issue, Dan? Or you feel you had your say, Josh? Any more?
Well, the only thing I was going to say was I read recently, I can't remember the company, but I think it was like a supermarket, maybe in the US, that actually, you know, on their automated tills, right, where you go pick something up, scan yourself, they actually implemented the tip thing, you know, to be you know, an optional tip. Like that would really bug me, right? You know, especially when you pick something off the shelf now, there's no one else involved. Like to pay a tip, for just getting your own thing and scanning it yourself and paying it yourself. Seems a bit obscure, but
and
yeah.
groceries are so expensive and such a key part of, you know, even if you don't go out to eat, even if you don't waste your money, you got to buy groceries. And if they could just get 10% of that or just 5% of that, that's some sweet money. And that could really hurt you if you're living check to check. And of course, South Park thought of it first. We all remember the tipping episode about Whole Foods, where they were like, "Oh, would you like to donate to the children? Would you like to donate to the children?" And the same thing, it's been done to us, except with tipping. Moving on, check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where you can see on this day in 2020, we talked about the North Korea attacks, police reform, and maybe Bitcoin 50K. We were also hanging out with the World Crypto Network crew at the Transylvania Crypto Conference from 2019. We were in CoinFest UK for the Manchester Conference in 2019, talking about Tom's first computer, Tom Trevathan. In 2018, we had a Bitcoin talk show about an Italian exchange getting hacked and seized. In 2017, we did the Bitcoin group number 146, the UAHF hard fork. 2016, we had Block Talk, a comprehensive review with Cabbage Tech. This is a famous video that was actually used in a trial and a case and so forth. I don't think Cabbage Tech delivered on their promises, and it was fascinating because the founder wore a November the 11th Guy Fawkes mask. We also had Bitcoin and altcoin trading number 31. In 2014, we had Tatiana Coin live and the Bitcoin Austin, Texas meetup with Christoph Atlas. You can check all these videos for free at worldcryptonetwork.com. Moving on to issue 3, Bitcoin dominance hits 2-year high. Bitcoin is separating from the market amid regulatory pain. Bitcoin dominance is on the rise, set to break through 50%, the highest in more than 2 years. The jump comes despite Bitcoin rising 54% to date, which would usually mean altcoins jumping more. Meanwhile, there's a regulatory clampdown, and it's damaged the reputation of Bitcoin and cryptos, but it looks like Bitcoin might be separating itself. Josh Shigala, what do you think about the Bitcoin dominance situation?
I don't know. It's only a matter of time till, I mean, like, the Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has wonderful. It has it is the thing you want to hedge against problems. But there's software that's being written, and technology is technology. So we'll see if someone might write some amazing technology. I don't understand this like obsession with Bitcoin has to be the one and only, and it's the, I mean, it's wonderful, and I love it to bits. It's my first love, and but there's technology is technology. So write cool shit, and don't screw people over, and you'll get some. Who knows what will happen? But I don't see Bitcoin dominance as some metric that should be followed. It is what it is. It's there. It's a metric, but at the end of the day, I like to see I like to see competition. Like, the whole reason why Satoshi created Bitcoin was to compete against the fiat system, and all of these other alts are also competition, and it keeps everything going, and it keeps Bitcoin honest. It keeps Bitcoiners hungry for better, cooler things. If it wasn't for some of these alts and Ethereum, we wouldn't have some of this stuff that we're seeing on Bitcoin now with NFTs on Bitcoin and this sort of thing. Whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, it is more technology that's being used, and ideas flourishing. So I don't know, Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin will always be dominant in my mind, but it's not that important.
That's what I think, Josh. Bitcoin's still 100% to me, right? It's still 21 million coins. You can still send it to everybody. Blocks are about 10 minutes a block. 100%
It was the first.
Best. It was the first. Why do we even got to bring market share into this? I don't even think it's part of the argument. It's just like Bitcoin's still 100%. And then people talk about all these other numbers. Dan, Eve, what do you think we're catching up in the old Bitcoin dominance index?
Well, I think obviously, Bitcoin is the one. It's the king, the queen, and the jack all in one, and the joker, and it's literally, as Josh said, it's like what I fell in love with initially. I still think that there's some use in some of these other projects. I think there's a lot of scams out there, huge amount of scams. So it's nice to kind of bring people back to the real world and explain why Bitcoin's here, especially when there's some of these. A lot of these scams out there, and although you can lose money from trading Bitcoin, especially by day trading the wrong way and leverage and stuff like that, you can still get a lot more losses from trading some of these crazy altcoins. And we've seen that with all these meme coins recently, right? I'm not sure how that Pepe is doing now, but it reached $1 billion sort of status. What is it doing now? So just out of curiosity, I mean, it's up 10% today, but it's definitely a lot lower than it peaked in sort of end of May, right? And so a lot of people would have been burnt by these other cryptocurrencies. What's more thought-provoking is that Ethereum's dominance is actually kind of seemingly on a steady rise since early 2020. So I think it does seem that there's definitely two kind of clear winners in terms of the leading coins that people are actually taking note of. Apart from like Tether, so there's Bitcoin at 45.9%, Ethereum at 19.9%. Tether's the next at 7.27, then BNB, which is kind of waning, especially with the lawsuit coming recently, and then pulling out. So Binance now pulled out of Netherlands, they pulled out of France, I believe, because they couldn't get the sort of the right certifications to trade. So you've really got, and then from then on, there's like USD coin, which is another stable 2.5%, Ripple 2.36%, Cardano 1.19 at 1.15, and Dogecoin at 0.89%. So those are really insignificant numbers compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum. And that I don't know if Ethereum will ever surpass Bitcoin in terms of market cap, not because of its good money, but just because of the fact that people just kind of ape into all these other projects that are run on Ethereum, and it becomes gas, and they obviously still don't have a limit, right? So Bitcoin still is a 21 million supply, whereas Ethereum and these other Ethereum hasn't got a supply yet. They haven't like solidified it, right? There's no supply cap. It can just, they've got this burning thing in, but it still doesn't match Bitcoin in the fact that there's scarcity to this level. So it does look like Ethereum's climbing, but as anything, it will go up and down with the hype. Bitcoin usually leads with hitting a huge dominance. Then there's all the altcoins that kind of follow behind it, because there's Bitcoin gains all this notoriety, goes all over the news. Everyone suddenly goes, "Oh, Bitcoin's it's climbing again," but I've missed the boat with Bitcoin, so I'm going to buy
one coin.
Exactly. They said it's the next Bitcoin on that Facebook group I read from Auntie May and the multi-level marketing crew there. So I think it's always gonna dominate everything else. It's hard money. It is money. It's becoming more so a store of value with all the hodl memes and stuff. Whereas there might be some utility in some of these other coins, and people use them for random things. That there's, as Josh is saying, that there's more of these things that people that gave Ethereum's this use case of fuel. They're coming to Bitcoin with NFTs, with ordinals, with inscriptions, with the BRC20, so tokens on Bitcoin. And although there was colored coins before, this is kind of different, it seems. Bitcoin will always dominate. When you said, I think you said it's always, I can't remember what you said. Like it's still real to me or something, and it made me remember that wrestling guy again. It's still real to me, damn it.
Hey, Proper Gold thinks I'm always keeps backing up that I'm an MMA fighter.
I feel the same way, Dan. I think that Ethereum dominates at the things that Ethereum dominates at. Like Ethereum's the best at having curio cards, the best at having CryptoPunks, the best at having a bunch of other Ethereum NFTs that are on there. I don't know about this. I just, exchanging market caps. It's like, is market cap really the goal of our project? Like, is that really we're optimizing for that. I don't feel that way, but I mean, maybe these other projects have been, and that's why they want to, you know, compare the size of their market caps.
Well,
Victoria, what do you think? Or go ahead, Dan.
Also, I was just going to say that it's market cap just seems like a really arbitrary measurement, because you can, you know, print these certain coins, you can print as much as you can. So it loses relevance, right? For Bitcoin, the market cap is actually relevant because there's a limited supply. For a lot of these other coins, it's almost like a, you know, it's just like a bendy yardstick, because it's, whoa, geez, proper gal. Oh, look at that.
Proper gold.
Proper
Jumps
gold.
in.
50
What a
euro
turn.
took. Jeez, wow. And yeah, so it's just a dodgy yardstick, I think. It's only relevant. The market cap really is only relevant to Bitcoin. It's not relevant to these other currencies. So it's just a bit of a wonky stick to be measuring Bitcoin against other currencies. And if anything, it's more of I think, used by other currencies to say, look at us, you know, we're climbing the market, the dominance against Bitcoin. So it's all waffle to me.
Well, you know, they had to think of something to measure, Dan. You know, they had to think of a comparison. Shout out to Proper Golf for the 50-pound tip, and shout out to Tune In Drop Out for the $20 tip. He says, when you create an asset class with no barriers to entry, it should come as no surprise when a financial powerhouse like BlackRock attempts to capitalize on its success, regardless of the underlying motives. And I agree. I don't think BlackRock is like a great friend to Bitcoin. I don't expect to see them at the next meetup. I think they're here for those sweet, sweet fees. And there's a possibility, though, that they get them and that they are a successful business in the Bitcoin ETF field. And again, more power to them. Let's see, Victoria, would you like to talk more about the great measuring comparisons of Bitcoin and altcoin dominance?
Well, I mean, my interest in Bitcoin is much more kind of currency related in terms of, you know, how it is going to end up helping humanity. And from that perspective, if you look back on the history of currencies, it is actually important that we get a dominant player, because that's what you need in order to have free markets. You know, that's the foundation that we use in order to measure trade with each other. And actually, you know, in history, when they were using gold and silver, you know, a lot of economic collapses occurred because of changes in that ratio. You know, that was how they had their financial disasters before we went on to Keynesian economics. So, you know, given that really we're hoping to kind of move to a world that's fairer and more equitable for everyone, not necessarily in the fact that everyone's equal, but everyone has an equal opportunity, because we're, you know, you're not operating in a world where people have unfair advantages because they're closer to the money supply, for example. You know, you're using you know, a single mechanism in order to measure trade, and that's the tool that everyone has, and that's what kind of creates the groundwork. So that's where we're heading towards. But of course, at the moment, you know, there's a journey before we get there, and you know, there's a lot of speculation as to, you know, which one's going to make it. And, you know, even Bitcoin, it's only 14 years old, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's a baby still, and it could still get things wrong. And in that kind of situation, you don't want to squash all of the other innovations, because someone may come up with something better than Bitcoin. At the moment, it doesn't look like it. And certainly Bitcoin's a market share. But the thing is, no one conceptualized Bitcoin until it was invented. So you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So, you know, I think it's important that we do have the innovation, but I think also it's important to recognize that we are looking for the one that will be the only one, because that's actually the thing that will make a difference. And I think, you know, in terms of this article, Bitcoin becoming more dominant, I mean, they talk about the fact that, well, you know, Bitcoin's doing quite well. Well, actually, it's doing exceptionally well. You know, a year after the 2017 high in 2018, it had gone from 20 grand down to 3. This time it's gone down from 60 to 20. You know, it's much less of a drop than it was last time. It might seem like it's significant, but, you know, proportionally, it's much less. So Bitcoin's doing incredibly well. And of course, you know, there's a lot of discussion about, you know, how Bitcoin is the most important, and there are lots of directions, angles that you can argue that argument from, which is very interesting. But yeah, those are the points I would just highlight for now.
Oh, I would agree, Victoria. And as we talked about earlier, network effect really does have a lock in to it. So there's a reason why you'd want to be the one. And then there's a structural reason where the one would rise up and above the other currencies and provide a backdrop for them or a backbone. Just as we can't quit Facebook, you want Bitcoin to be that payment service that you can't quit. You're like, I can't quit that because I need to pay this guy and this guy and this guy. And they all take Bitcoin. And once that list is, 5, 10, 15 people, you're not going to use another currency. You're not going to use Venmo or PayPal, even if to your mind they seem very similar to Bitcoin from a user perspective. But we're here on a male-dominated Bitcoin show to talk about dominance, and now we're going to talk about the price of Bitcoin and see the true dominant predictor in all predictors, the greatest predictors. People have made millions of dollars on this thing. You don't even want to know. But Dan, Eve, it's your chance to predict, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Well, I was right again for like the second time in 700 guesses. So I think that I may be on a lucky streak, and I'm going to go higher this time. I said lower last week and it was lower by 0.36%. So I'm going to go higher.
Victoria Jones, higher or lower?
Higher.
Josh Shigala, higher or lower?
To the moon, baby.
Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Here we go. As I see it, yes. As I see it, yes. The ball is optimistic about the future.
We have consensus.
Yeah.
Moving on to issue 4. Bitcoin-friendly Miami Mayor Francis Suarez jumps into the presidential race. Suarez joins an increasingly crowded field as a long-shot candidate for the Republican nomination. The mayor has accepted his salary in Bitcoin. Of course, he also created the incredibly popular Miami coin that everyone can use to pay their bills in the Miami area. Of course, unfortunately, Miami coin lost 95% of its value from a high of around 5 cents 8 months ago. And a second city coin, NYC coin, has been canceled, citing the liquidity as the reason for the decision. Suarez says that despite Miami coin struggles, he became a believer in crypto. People ask me the same thing about Bitcoin, the fact that it's lost more than 50% of its value, but that doesn't change my feelings about the fundamental technology. Josh Shigala, what do you think about the mayor of Miami running for president?
I mean, yeah, you've already got DeSantis. I don't know. It seems tough. Seems like a tough thing to run against Trump and DeSantis. They're both pretty well loved by large crowds of people. Like just coming and like, why waste the money? Just maybe run next time. Propago, what are you doing? You're just drunk with passion for this show. Here. Thanks for the tip, man. And thank you very much, everybody. Hit the like for Propago. What a guy. What a guy. I'll even mention you next time I'm in the ring. But yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, I these strange Bitcoin types that finally get it. Politicians, I don't know, politicians are the last people I really care to talk about. So I don't know. He likes Bitcoin. Cool.
Oh, Josh, you're ruining all the fun here. We're supposed to take this serious and have a whole thought piece about if the mayor of Miami has any chance in a national race where no one knows who he is. I love these weekly, they take Bitcoin, therefore they're a Bitcoiner presidential candidates. They've been pretty bad so far. I don't want to restart last week's fight, but we've got a lot of really fringe people that all of a sudden start taking Bitcoin, and all of a sudden we're supposed to just fall in line. Dan, Eve, this guy takes Bitcoin. He's the mayor of Miami. Does he have your vote?
Well, I mean, he's pro Bitcoin, which is good. But I think, as Josh is saying, he's going up against two kind of giants, right? Trump and DeSantis. They seem like they've got a lot more sway. The danger here is that, as I said last week, it's the very kind of partisan politics of the US, right, could drive a bunch of people, say from the Democrat side, to not really like, Bitcoin because, DeSantis likes Bitcoin, so and so. So it kind of would drive them away, not from a logical perspective, not saying a logical perspective, as in just by following the politics rather than actually going Bitcoin is bad because I don't, because of a reason that sounds more logical. It's more like, oh, I'm going to stay away from that because DeSantis likes Bitcoin. So I think that's going to be, it's going to polarize Bitcoin when Bitcoin should be more apolitical. I mean, obviously, yeah, I think what was there was a quote, I can't find it now, but he mentioned about, he said that, the fact that Bitcoin lost 50% of its value doesn't change my feelings about the fundamental technology, which is actually a really good point. Like it has its pumps and dumps, and it goes up, it goes down, but ultimately the technology is the same. I think that's a very good point. It's people. A lot of people get into Bitcoin because of the idea of making lots of money. A lot of people get sour on Bitcoin because they lost a lot of money. But the fact is that it's a technology that's very much evolving, and it's slowly, it's quite rapidly growing in the sort of numbers of users. And it's going to be a technology that's going to be around for a while. So I think that would make Bitcoin resistant to the kind of the political nature. I don't think there's been many outside of the US in terms of politicians that are obviously, apart from El Salvador and Bukele, that have actually said they're really kind of pro Bitcoin. I think there was one in Amsterdam a while back. But it does seem like it's less in the forefront of politics, apart from in the US, which is somewhere where the partisan sort of nature of politics could have much more of a sway. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Go for it, man. Run for president. Get some publicity for Bitcoin, and hopefully he'll use his power and the money that his donations for promoting Bitcoin in a good, positive way, rather than just trying to, be just another politician.
I do agree, Dan. There is a risk of Bitcoin being seen as right-wing money, and that people won't touch it, not just because of, say, the environmental issue, which, has its pros and cons, but just because they've seen it with, insert this guy's name here. That guy used it, therefore I'm out. Whereas, everybody takes USD. Everybody's like, oh, you got $20, I'll take it. Nobody's like, that $20 is used by that person. So I do think we need to be careful of that, because we do want to be neutral, like money in that.
It's like ivermectin. It got all weird. Like, here's a medication. It's Republican. What? It's just so weird.
It's horse medicine, but that's a different issue. Victoria Jones, what do you think about Miami mayor? And we've had a lot of other kind of, I take Bitcoin, now I'm a Bitcoin politician running through our system lately. What do you think?
Well, of course, he's not the first crypto personality to run for presidential office. I mean, obviously, Brock Pierce had a go. I suppose it's the kind of thing you do if you've got lots of money behind you, is like run for president. But I mean, normally when you've got people running for president, you've kind of heard of them. In the UK, you kind of know who the personality is before they're nominated for president. And this guy, I'd never heard of him at all. So I don't fancy his chances, because I'd heard of DeSantis. Of course, everyone knows who Trump is. So, I think Josh is absolutely right. I don't think he's a big enough personality to kind of really make a run for it. And of course, the idea of making Bitcoin political as well. I mean, I don't think it's right wing or left wing money. I think it destroys the whole paradigm and creates a new paradigm. That's the way I would see it. But of course, people aren't really getting that message if you're just getting one side of the aisle, promoting it. And of course, remember, in 2017, it was Trump who claimed credit for actually bringing down the Bitcoin bubble. So it's definitely not a right wing. It's not a right wing currency by any stretch of the imagination, all politicians are vulnerable to it. Hopefully they're going to be significantly reduced and significantly less paid once the world runs on Bitcoin. So I'm looking forward to that moment in time.
I agree, Victoria. In addition to Brock Pierce, we've also had famous libertarian Vermin Supreme, who ran for president multiple times. He's known for wearing a boot as a hat and carrying a large toothbrush. And he said if elected president of the United States, he will pass a law requiring people to brush their teeth. He also campaigned on a platform of zombie apocalypse awareness and time travel research, and promised, most importantly, a free pony for every American. I personally met with Vermin Supreme at the PorcFest convention in New Hampshire, and he is indeed a very serious candidate for the president of the United States, at least as serious as all these Bitcoin candidates. But enough on Miami and Miami Coin. We've kicked them enough. Moving on to our bonus issue, issue 5, surprise issue. The United States government owns way more Bitcoin than any other country. So why aren't they selling it? As of course you know, as longtime viewers of this show, everyone knows that the US government is saving their Bitcoin until they can build one Smithsonian museum in every state. 50 states, 50 museums paid for in Bitcoin. Dan, Eve, what do you think about this article that says the United States government owns more Bitcoin than any other country? Why aren't they selling it, other than the obvious reason to fund the Smithsonian Museum?
Well, maybe Yellen has had a quiet word. That was a terrible joke there, from Yellen to quiet. But anyway, with the holders of the private keys, he said, "Look, didn't she say the other day that the admit that the US dollar is waning in influence around the world? It is in decline. So it would only seem logical to hedge a small amount of that Bitcoin value compared to what the dollar is, so circulated by the dollar. Just keep that small amount rather than auctioning it off like they did with Silk Road." But is that so? Is that $2 billion? Was that from is that the Bitfinex money? Because that was, or is that separate? Is this just? I didn't quite get. Is it, where the $2 billion came from? But yeah, because they still have the Bitfinex money, right? That came from the rapping lady, the crocodile of Wall Street. So maybe this is a different stash. Maybe they've got multiple stashes. I'd imagine that there's so many kind of hidden factions of I'd imagine that each different department or some of the different departments of CIA or whatever have got their ultra secret stash of their own ultra secret stash of Bitcoin, because surely there's if you could make when the the Trade Center thing happened and they said $3 trillion disappeared or something, whatever along those lines. If you can make that disappear, then surely you can make a lot of Bitcoin kind of disappear and save that for a rainy day. Because even as we're seeing other countries that are stopping settling their oil in the US dollar, and that's going to slowly happen. It seems it's going to kind of cascade out, and there'll be all sorts of crops and other stuff that's not going to be and other commodities that won't be traded in the dollar. As we said last week, whether that will eventually be replaced by Bitcoin, it's going to be a big thing, because it would require countries to have huge stockpiles of Bitcoin in order to trade. So there's a big kind of prerequisite to Bitcoin just taking over as the world index of oil and whatever trading. But I'm with you, Tom. I think they should save at least just a little bit of it for more museums.
I seriously doubt that the U.S. government is pooling their Bitcoin together like Sam Bankman-Fried, storing it all in one account. Certainly, they'd never do something so silly as that. It's likely an amalgam number. Victoria, what should the government do with their Bitcoin other than, of course, more Smithsonian museums?
Well, I mean, from what I've heard, the Smithsonian museums are purely set up to hide important historical artifacts rather than display them. So I definitely wouldn't want to give them more power. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the US has so much debt to pay. Maybe they should hold on to it, and they might have a fighting chance of actually paying it at some point.
That's our secret backup plan to pay off the debt. Buy Bitcoin. Josh Segala, what do you think about the government? They've got a lot of Bitcoin. They don't know what to do with it.
Oh, it's like any shit coiner. You know, they've got went like for EOS, for instance, they have billions of dollars. What they do, they bought Bitcoin with it and let EOS die. I think it's very similar with the US dollar. They'll slowly accumulate Bitcoin and let as the dollar dies. It's I mean, they know that they can print it to nowhere. I mean, they're the ones doing it. So why wouldn't you buy and hold or steal from other criminals Bitcoin and keep it? Yeah, and paying off debt, I don't know. I think they'll just default on it and say we've got the guns.
As the saying says, you can always kick the can down the road. Because you could always kick the can down the road.
Further, lift the debt ceiling.
Kick it again.
Actually, but the fact of the matter is, they could literally just buy as much Bitcoin as they want because they have all the money in the world. The Federal Reserve
Infinite.
has an infinite amount.
There's an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve.
Well,
Yeah,
and it
indeed.
would be great if they bought all
Massive.
that, because each time they get less and less Bitcoin for their purchase, and each time they just print some more money and they'd get less and less Bitcoin, and that would be very, very, very bad for them.
Yeah. By the way, BTC Moon Guy brings up free Ross. You know, there you go. That's the big shout out to Ross. Still rotting, and Julian still rotting.
And as
Mhm.
we said many times, mostly the website was used to sell large amounts of cannabis for large amounts of money, which is now being done in almost every state in the union legally. So how long are they going to keep him in jail for something that everyone is doing legally now and making tons of money? But we're running out of time. Dan, Eve, are you ready? We're putting you on the spot with a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
Man, that's oh dear. Okay, so I'm going to go for Black. You know, the obvious one. I think BlackRock are going to hit it. They're going to hit the spot ETF, and they're going to get approved. I just can't see it being rejected with such a high, a success rate in the past, and being such a huge company. And I think with that acceptance is going to come an inevitable like massive pump. You know, maybe not to all time high, but it'll be a huge local pump before the the halvening. So that's probably going to be the real start of the hype cycle, I think, for the next halvening.
See, I also thought it was going to happen, but now if Dan's picking it, I don't know. We should hire you to cool casino tables. You could come and cool them out. BlackRock is shaking their boots now. Victoria Jones, you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Well, my story of the week is my most recent newsletter, which is called Bitcoin and the Poverty Line. Because one of the things I wanted to look into was, what would the world look like if we actually lived on a gold standard again, and can kind of compared it to some of the times in the past. And one of the things I discovered is that, poverty levels actually reduced more significantly when we're on a gold standard. So if you want an explanation of that, by all means, go to my newsletter. I also discovered that the UN defines poverty as those only able to spend less than $1.98 a week. And they haven't changed that level since 1990. So the UN is not using inflation when they're calculating poverty levels, which I also think has some interesting implications. And of course, these are things that haven't been talked about yet when it comes to Bitcoin. So I thought it was interesting to write about that. The most recent newsletter on my website is now available for free for everybody to look into. And if you want to be notified of when the latest one is, you can sign up to the newsletter list. All of my old ones are now behind a Lightning paywall, just to give all of you guys an opportunity to practice making Lightning payments. So there you go.
Nice.
You have to admire their ignorance in just ignoring inflation in calculating poverty. It's probably a lot easier just to ignore inflation. I could see that when I was a kid. I used to just turn on caps lock and just type in all caps because it was easier than pushing shift all the time. So, the UN is just a step there. They've got a great plan. Josh Segala, prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
The story of the week is that, we were going to launch on the zero knowledge proofs, and we decided not to because there's a low network effect and there's a bunch of other things that just aren't ready, including chain link data feeds and stuff. So we are launching the standard on Arbitrum very, very soon. The interface is all like 95% ready. Everything's so close now, so it's really exciting. And we've been looking at some ordinals and how to, because all of these smart vaults, when you lock up Ethereum or anything into a smart contract or wrap Bitcoin, that smart vault becomes an NFT, so you can sell your debt and collateral. And so we want to port those over, so those NFTs can also be ported over to Bitcoin, and for people to trade their debt and collateral, or even like package different debt and collateral packages up. I don't know what people will do with this technology that we're building, so it'll be really exciting. You can check out more on thestandard.io.
Very cool, Josh. Thanks for the update. And I had an exciting week this week, mainly in sports. A lot of people don't care, but here you go. The Oakland A's pack the Coliseum for a reverse boycott and demand that the owners sell the team. I was there. It was the most exciting in the fifth inning when the fans stood almost silent and then exploded. An incredible chance of sell the team. The Oakland A's are upset because the owner is moving the team to Las Vegas, which is also kind of good for me, but also bad for me because we lose the Oakland Athletics. So this is a very sad thing here in Oakland, as the baseball just uses the cities against each other to get free money from the state and the county. A's fans hope that it can be stopped, but it's gone along pretty far so far. Meanwhile, the Vegas Golden Knights won their first Stanley Cup in their history, defeating the Florida Panthers 9-3, which is a lot of goals for a hockey team. So exciting times in Las Vegas. We're stealing a team, and sad times in Oakland. Their team is being stolen. It's a complicated story. The owner basically trades away all the players whenever they become good. He doubled the ticket prices and doubled the parking prices. It's exactly like the movie Major League. He made the team terrible to chase the fans away, so he could say there are no fans, so he could then sell the team to another place. Moving it to Vegas makes it on paper much more valuable. So the theory is he moves it to Vegas. It's worth $1.5 billion instead of $1 billion. He sells it, gets that extra $0.5 billion. His parents invented the store, The Gap. So he worked very hard to inherit that money, and taking a team away from Oakland and from these fans seems to be what he wants his legacy to be in this world. So it's very sad.
Isn't the team like, isn't it just a name? Like what I don't get it. Like why wouldn't Oakland then just start a new team? Because the players can move anyway, right?
It's
called
not
the
exactly
Bees.
that. One of the most interesting things about this is Congress actually has an antitrust exemption for Major League Baseball. So if say that Oakland wanted to have their own team and start a new baseball league, they can't, because Congress has said no one is allowed to compete with Major League Baseball, and that these teams are allowed to act together as a cartel. Whereas European football clubs are all separate teams. And let's say like a team does what the A's did and like runs the team badly, trades away all the players, no one goes to see them. In the European leagues, the team goes bankrupt. In the American leagues, the team is protected by a cartel and socialism. The other teams will then support the team, keeping it alive. The A's have turned this into their primary business, just taking money from the other teams. And now they're moving from the 5th media market to the 40th media market. So they're going to get less television money. So they're pretty much going to be a team that takes from the other teams, a welfare team for the rest of their existence. It's very surprising that the owners, who are one of the last steps to stop this, they have to vote 75% owner vote to move the team, that they would allow this ownership strategy, this business model to come out. Because now if you're a group of money, you have money out there, you can buy a team, run it into the ground for 20 years, move it somewhere else, make $500 million. So it's really easy as like certainly you'd have to have no morals, not care about the cities or the teams or the people or anything like that. But if you just wanted to, make money as an owner, that seems to be the best strategy.
Proper Gold just smashed you with another 50. What a guy. Stop drinking. I'm the only one allowed to be drinking here.
It's even blurred out.
It's even blurred
you
out.
can't show this. It's below the watershed.
Thanks so much to Proper Goal, and tune in, tune out for the donations in the chat. And sorry for talking so much sports ball and all that, but it is a fascinating economic and political issue, the way they use these cities against each other. Oakland had a similar package to the Las Vegas package. They were going to get free money there too, but the theory is the team is more valuable in Vegas, so he's going to move it, then sell it just for the money. So it really is,
But I don't know. The plan doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make. How can that make sense? You drive a team down. Surely that loses value. Why would then it gain value if you moved it to Las Vegas? I don't know. I don't buy it.
At the core, when the legislator in Las Vegas decided about whether or not they should give $400 million of, basically, this is actually the people's money. The Raiders, they had a hotel tax that got them $700 million. The Golden Knights actually built their own stadium, which everyone hoped would become the standard. The Giants and the Golden Knights building it their own. But basically, they went down to it, and at the end of the day, there's 30 Major League Baseball teams, and they said, this is our chance to get one. Yeah, it's one with a bad owner. He trades away the teams. There's a similar issue here where he also owns the San Jose Earthquakes, a soccer team, and he got a new stadium there, and then he didn't invest in the team. So we have a similar issue where we already believe that he will not invest in the team, that he will get this welfare money from the other teams as his business strategy. And it just comes down to that Nevada will give him the money. And if Nevada won't give him the money, Nashville will give him the money, or Portland.
Proper Goal will give him the money.
Proper Goal will give him the money. Yes. So it's just a mess where there aren't enough of these teams, and the Congress allows them to have their exemption, and then they use these cities against each other. Because the real thing that's happening here, this isn't really about Oakland or Las Vegas. What this is about is 3 or 4 other cities that have dilapidated stadiums where Major League Baseball is going to come to them and they're going to say, remember what happened to Oakland? It could happen to you, Detroit Tigers. You better build us a new stadium, or they're going to be the Arizona Tigers. We don't care. We believe in nothing. Like 50 years of history, all these people bringing out their kids saying that, grandma went to games, mom went to games, kid goes to games. What about the daughters, the futures? We believe in nothing. We are the Major League Baseball, the mafia criminal cartel of baseball, and we'll just move your team.
We believe in nothing, Lebowski.
Nothing, Lebowski. So
I blame Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's invaded the sports, and then the similar comparison, and I guess the European people don't watch Ted Lasso, but on the Ted Lasso show, which is about an American coach coaching British football. Hey, Proper Goal. Thanks, man. Another 50.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I hope someone didn't take over your account or something, man. You got hacked. But yeah, Ted Lasso talks about, and they talk about the comparison between the English champion or the European Championship League, where any team can play their way up, and the idea of a super league where only the top 10 teams could play in it. And what's in the American system, we pretty much already have a super league. These special, blessed teams that are part of the cartel can play. And even if you had like a great star or something and you started up the Sacramento baseball team, they don't put you in. There's no way you can win enough games to get into this. And they're trying to change the World Football League so that it would be more like the American system, because it's a big problem if they get eliminated and so forth. But I feel we've talked way too much about sports. We better end the show, especially since Provigal might tip us more. He needs to save that money for beer. So thanks again to everybody for joining us, giving us a thumbs up down below, putting in a comment later on, sharing a link to the
tipping us.
And tips. It's all helps. So maybe we should talk about tips more often. But thanks so much for joining us. Until next time,